Good evening. This is the inaugural broadcast of the Toronto Evening News. I'm your host, Dorian Sky. So today, or the last couple of days, or maybe it was today, the police chief held himself a news meeting where he kind of tried to reassure the public that next year wasn't going to be quite as bloody as this last one. He said the situation this year was kind of thrown off by the vanity and the damage. And he says they're going to be reinforcing the staff, hiring some more officers. So if you're interested in a job in law enforcement, now's the time to get into the Toronto Police Force if you're interested in shooting at some shooters. Saunders also mentioned that they have been getting a lot of guns off the street. Have you ever felt just kind of like you're not really wanted? President Trump paid a visit to some troops in Iraq and stuff. Also tried to get a meeting with the Iraqi prime minister or president, but it wasn't meant to be. He ended up having to talk with the guy over the phone. It's a little bit of a letdown. It's kind of like, you're in your ex-girlfriend's neighborhood, sort of like, okay, I don't know why I would say ex-girlfriend. You're in your friend's neighborhood. Hey, I'm in the neighborhood. Can we hang? Well, no, not really. And you're on the phone with your friend, and they're what? So obviously they're not friends. But meanwhile, he's reassuring the troops that the border wall is going to be great, and that it's silly to fight other people's wars unless you're getting paid well for it. He's basically described Americans as chumps when they are fighting without getting paid for it. So he's basically talking to the people in Iraq who are fighting without being mercenaries. So they're getting paid for it, but he's sort of calling them chumps for being there, and he's talking about how I'm sending troops home from this country, sending troops home from that country, and he's hanging out in this country that he hasn't sent troops home from yet, and kind of between the lines calling them chumps. I don't know whether this was before getting snubbed by the PM or after, but some Iraqi government officials were also complaining, basically kind of saying like, why didn't you call first? And it's kind of a funny attitude coming from people who decided to host the Americans and let them have American military bases in the area. So I believe on Wednesday, somebody got into a fight with somebody and decided to drive their car into them as a continuation of the fight. The Dundas and Bathurst container shops were actually set up without permission by the community center at that location at Alexandria Park there. They've been there for a few years now. The businesses are doing quite well. Surprisingly, they cost as little as $11 per day. The path to running one is basically being involved in some of their entrepreneurship workshops, and the turnaround for getting a container would be maybe 6 months. Hard to believe that anyone would give any of them up and there would be any turnover at all. Tomorrow is going to be kind of warm and wet, so just switch up one of those layers of warm stuff for a layer of plastic stuff. You'll be all good. Today on CBC Radio, they had a guest on or they had a segment partnering with Participation, where they were talking about winter exercise. They managed to mention, for when you're living in Toronto and you're trying to get exercise in the winter, why not try long distance skiing or maybe walking? So they managed to mention those two things. Didn't say anything about cycling, of course, which all year round can get you anywhere. They also later in the on CBC Radio 1, a caller in a segment talking about terrible gifts says the worst gift of all time that he received was a bicycle, not because it was a bike, but because it was a road bike instead of a BMX or a mountain bike. The hosts agreed that kids like BMXs and mountain bikes more than road bikes. A parent who is also a sex ed teacher has taken it into her own hands to spread the 2015 sex ed curriculum for the province herself using YouTube, and so she's doing that to make up for the fact that it's been pulled from the actual school curriculum. There's been a huge rebound to the stock market after it took a massive tank over the holidays. The big rally was in tech stocks. Weed grower Bonify has been found to have 200 kilograms of quote-unquote unauthorized marijuana in their stock. So this is basically stuff that somebody grew, they didn't grow it, and they're not allowed to buy it, and they're not allowed to sell anything that they didn't grow. So now they're being investigated. Apparently, very small amount of it was sold. Japan is set to start commercial whaling again. So Richard Rose, who's been a pastor at a church in Markham, and has recently been running a daycare out of his home, and has managed a kids hockey team, has been charged with sexual assault and interference. Complainants came forward to police. Police investigated, found more complainants, and now they're actually pursuing it. Major news networks today ignored labor news and reported instead on sports between car commercials. Kevin Spacey's hand may be in a video groping his sex assault accuser's body. It might be his hand. This might be video of Kevin Spacey's hand. The U.S. government is in its 6th day of shutdown, affecting 800,000 workers. ProPublica has found, during their investigation, rampant sexual assault at child's detention centers in the United States for the refugee or migrant children. Russia's new nuclear missiles will travel at 20 times the speed of sound. Putin basically said, "Merry Christmas to the Russian people. Here's your gift of our new unstoppable nuclear missiles." The first Canadian purchaser of legal marijuana has proclaimed that he's a longtime marijuana user. He described to journalists that he first purchased, or he first tried marijuana for pain when he was quite young, which would basically make him too young at the time that he first tried it to be able to legally purchase it now. So he's celebrating being able to legally purchase it now at his current age. He has packaged up the first legally sold gram of marijuana and is never going to smoke it. And that is the news for Toronto, December 27th, 2018. Apart from the fact that this new news show has started up. This is it. So this is the first of that. Have a great sleep, and see you tomorrow.